The most important thing and what I'm going to try and achieve is I'm actually going to take you on your journey. Because each and every one of you has your own journey with your own businesses, with your own goals and wants and desires and the things that you want to achieve. And being sustainably viable is highly relevant to your journey. It's not about changing your business, it's about adding to your business so you can serve your customers better. It's about doing a lot more with less. And so what I'm actually going to do is the journey is actually going to be quite quick because I'm going to give you a 20-minute shot of a two-day training course. So the first thing you really need to understand is, of course, habits. You've got to start creating habits into your business that actually become as habitual as constantly monitoring your cash flow, checking your balance sheet, and understanding the actual economic strength of your business. So you've actually got to see it from a point of view of what are my impacts. What impacts am I actually getting in my business that I am not seeing? Now we will actually look at this as environmental impacts. So that is things like your carbon footprint, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. And the point is about the carbon footprint is, of course, that it's actually cost you money to actually produce that footprint. And so what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to look at how we can actually measure that and then apply it to the finance of the business. Now, I'm qualified to be able to do this because part of my journey to be here in front of you is that when I set my mission, I researched very, very heavily and very rigorously, and I actually wrote my first how-to book in 2010 called Sustainable Growth Through Sustainable Business. And what that actually led me to do was work with the World Resources Institute and the World Business Council of Sustainable Development and work on the international standards called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which are the international standards for measuring this stuff. And all standards below it all come off that. In fact, our own government uses it. And you may have come across other standards like PAS 2050, and they all come off the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. What I also did was I worked on the Global Reporting Initiative. I've worked on BS 8990, which is a Sustainable Development International Standards. There's a whole bunch of other standards I've worked on, which you can see on my profile at any particular time that you want to. So what we're actually looking at is understanding the impacts of your business and what it actually means financially. But don't forget that those impacts to your business also impact on your customers. I'll give you an example of an SME I worked with. And what we actually wanted to do was we wanted to look at the impacts between functions of a business. And I called in to one meeting the customer services manager and the logistics manager. And it took about 1.5 hours to find £100,000 worth of waste. Because what was actually happening, and what happens in most businesses, is of course managers are targeted to operate their particular function to the best that they can. So they operate to what fits within their remit. What they don't do is understand how the other functions are running around them. And how we actually found out they were losing £100,000 was because the customer services manager had one set of budgets, logistics had another, which basically meant service engineers were waving at each other as they passed on the motorway. A crazy situation, but incredibly common. So again, just think about the processes that are going on inside your business and how things connect, because it's about making connections and how those connections across all your processes actually are impacting against one another. So you all work within an office. Some of you might have buildings. It depends on the size of your business. But whether you turn over £75,000 or £75 million, what I'm actually talking about is relevant to all sizes. So if you're working in a building, it's about how that building is used. The lighting. Some of you, of course, will say, oh yes, well, I've changed to energy efficient lighting. But if you don't change the behaviours and the processes around them, are you maximising that investment? I would actually suggest, no, you're not. So it's about getting to know your baseline. Then, something which comes up and is very common, of course, is understanding your risks. Risks come in many shapes and forms, an environmental risk or a social risk. Now, most of the risks to your businesses are probably coming to you through the supply chain. It's not uncommon that actually 80 to 90% of the impact on a business is actually their supply chain, which means there's a lot of money been hitting your balance sheets that you could actually negate. You could actually stop it happening, but you can only stop it happening if you're aware of it and you can actually see it. You need to uncover it, because those fruits are there. And I work with a lot of businesses, and certainly through my work with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and the companies we work with on that, both as large companies and their supply chains, that we know by experience there will be a lot of risk and a lot of waste coming up to you. And I'll give you a couple of examples as well. There's a business working with, and they've been asked to tender for a very, very large chunk of business. Because they're very unique, they have very unique services, and what they do, they're really, really good at. So they've been asked to tender because they've been given the nod that they'll probably get it because they are so good at what they do. Tender document came in, and it's to a very well-known company, international company, and in that tender is sustainability credentials. Didn't have any. Now this tender will actually grow their business by 4 times. So by not having the right credentials and the right habits inside their business has exposed them to a risk of potentially losing some business which the client is wanting to give them. But by having an unsustainable supplier is a risk to their business. Because what if, in their supply chain, your supply chains, you were buying from someone who had human rights abuses going on in a factory somewhere? There were children working in the factory. That is a risk you are taking, and you are potentially complicit in that. What if there's minerals making up pieces of electronic equipment which are coming from areas of conflict and high risk, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo? You're buying stuff which is actually going to arm people who then go out and wipe out villages. It's all about risk, and it's about understanding that risk. And that's why there's the Carbon Disclosure Project, and they're focusing on supply chains now, because again, whether you've got a small business or a larger business is immaterial. You are part of the supply chain to someone else. And over 90% of CEOs of large companies have already committed to saying that they will stop allowing companies to supply them that do not have the right habits in their business. Because it's a risk to them. Because NGOs can see these big companies and they can hit them pretty easily. And so they need to stop this happening, because we've seen it so much recently in the press all the time, particularly in clothing, as well as the electronics industry, that this kind of exposure to risk is happening. But let's look at something closer to home. Taxes. Taxes are changing all the time, because governments are beginning to realise, and Zach referred to it this morning, is in fact we actually need a healthy environment to be able to support a good economy. But we need a good economy to support a healthy environment, because I deeply believe that the best way to protect the environment and to protect society is for each and every one of your businesses to be the best that it can be and to be as profitable as it can be. But it's how you make the profit that's actually going to create the differentiation, because you're going to be able to prove it by taking on the 4 clear habits. But as I say, it's a journey, so we will go on to the next habit. So what we're actually going to be doing, what we can show you to do, is now you're finding all this new information, and it's how to leverage that information to the best advantage, because we want you to serve your customers better. We want you to be able to make better profits. And also, those profits are going to have an underlying strength. A lot of investors, a lot of banks would probably want you to talk about economic profit, which is different to normal profit, because it is actually the factor that actually really shows the true strength to a balance sheet, if that is really understood. And it's like it was being said this morning about if you're going for finance, if you really don't, if your cash flow has been going down and you answer the question, well, I don't really know why, you sound a bit of a risk. But if you don't know your risks and your exposure to environmental risk or social risk, that's also a major element to not being able to get finance. And one of the most important things to be able to leverage here is, of course, ease towards capital. And working with a company, I remember working with Caroline, and what we actually did was we wanted to find a new revenue stream. And it was actually leveraging the information that we had actually uncovered, where we found a whole new revenue stream for the company. And the revenue stream was so great, it actually doubled their margins. And what it was they were actually supplying cabling into IT centres and into all sorts of other suppliers where cabling and network is happening in our interconnected world. And instead of just installing and allowing other people to take the stuff away, what we actually did was we created a whole new service. So whilst they installed, they de-installed at the same time, and then rehabilitated and recycled the equipment back at their own warehouse, and then shared the value with the customer. So what was the benefit to how? So that's how did they double their margins on that? Well, it's quite simple. What they did was they created complete differentiation and a value advantage position away from the competition. Because they were sharing the value from an end of life point of view, from an end of use life, it meant the whole life cost of the equipment they were putting in was, of course, instantly far better than the competition could do. Because the value was shared at the end. And so they started moving away from talking about price. Because when in against their competitors, what was happening is, well, you're all pretty much the same. It's all very, very close. But all of a sudden, the sales team were trained to word it differently. They worded it differently because they could, because we could prove it. And they stopped selling on the price and saying, oh yes, and we give great service. And what they were actually now saying is, our whole life cost of use is X, because we know it's X, because we've measured it, and we can do this off the end, and when we do this off the end, these are the predicted kind of cost savings we can make on that end, and of course we'll give you a rebate on that, which makes our whole life cost Y. All of a sudden, the competition were completely wiped out. All because they understood their baseline, all because they understood their risks, and we could start getting creative on capturing, creating and delivering more value. So it really worked. And another classic of this was actually I went into there was a small SME, and they knew that their fuel bills were just going absolutely crazy. Well, we went in and it didn't take long, it took about a month, and we started reducing their bills by about 25%. So if you could save 25% on fuel bills, that's not bad. But because it's about making those connections. Don't keep looking at one thing. Understand and verify across whole systems. Because if you make a saving in one place, it could actually have a negative effect in another. So it's understand the connections. What we actually found was a whole bunch of training needs around that too. In short, what it actually meant is we also went in, we did some training with the management, we did some training with the sales team, made them a whole lot more productive. So we didn't just reduce 25% down, but we also, of course, raised their sales. The company doubled in size in just over a year. So again, it's about seeing the bigger picture and making the connections. So what we've also spoken about today at great length, of course, is how you communicate this. and it's about creating authentic reports. Because so many people, and I include large organisations as well, not just SMEs, everybody thinks, well, you have an environmental policy, you stick it on the website, oh yeah, we're very, very caring about the environment, and we make sure we switch the lights off. Well, without any verification, without any proof, it's just unbelievable. It is actually, it's unsubstantiated. But the point is, if you buy a technical piece of equipment, don't you want to see the technical spreadsheets on it? Well, why should a company be any different? And it's about your business and your journey and your provenance. So what I'm actually saying is about creating authentic reports. If you measure it properly, you can manage it properly. Because so much actually gets measured, but because they don't actually understand what it is they're measuring, it doesn't get managed properly. And it's about leveraging what you're actually reading and understanding of how you can actually serve your customers better to improve the whole life costs, to improve your advantage, and it also improves your margins, as well as reducing your costs. I'll give you a very good example of a company that did this. It's actually a stationery company. They will supply you with your pens and your paper and your paper clips. When the financial crash happened, you would expect a company like that to get hit badly. But they understood the importance of the habits. It is. Their business rocketed because they were now picking up tenders for supplies which their competitors couldn't. Because they were proving it. They were giving provenance to their business. And it made a heck of a difference to them, much to the chagrin of their competitors. But then their competitors were used to lip service. And a quick environmental policy, and we make sure we treat everybody right, they thought was enough. But when anybody who went to university, I bet you didn't get your degrees without having to prove what you did. So why do you want to play so fast and loose with your businesses? Because surely you're in business because you want to have a better life for you and your family. And it's your family's security that you could be gambling with, because more and more and more the pressure is on to do this stuff, but it isn't complicated. It's really simple. I mean, I spent a lot of years figuring this out so I could figure it out for other people, so they don't have to think about it. And it is very, very simple. But that's the bottom line, because your businesses and the success of your business has a whole host of people reliant on your success. There's you, there's your family. If you have employees, and then there's employees' families. Then there's the supply chain and their families. They're all reliant on your success. But if you take account of that, I can absolutely assure you that you will be starting to create a very authentic message. But you're also reducing your risk, because you've actually taken time to know about it. I mean, after all, as directors of companies, are we not actually obliged under the Companies Act of 2006 as amended to always do the best for our companies? It is a legal responsibility. In 2013, there was an amendment which said that a director has to report anything that is material or may be material that will affect the value of that business. Well, since when did ignorance of the law suddenly start becoming an excuse for not having to live by it? Because these are serious material risks, but they're also fantastic opportunities. Awesome opportunities. And by understanding that and being able to communicate it with clarity, you are going to stand yourselves way out in front of your competitors, so you can grow your business. It's not just about where you can save the money, and I've shown you examples where we can save huge money. It doesn't take long to find it. But by knowing the risks, you expose the fresh opportunities, and you can grow your business. So what we're really talking about is excellence, we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about integrity, but it's being effective. Everybody keeps talking about efficiency, 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 and I see it as a common thing all the time. It's not effective because they're not making the connections. It's all well and good buying a for example, a low energy bulb, but what's the point of leaving it on all the time? Because you're not maximising your investment, are you? But that's what people do. They think, oh, well, that's enough. So they're not serving their customers any better because they're not seeing the bigger picture. And by understanding this, it actually helps you understand your customers better, because what you actually do is you're actually reducing the impact you're making on your customers, which means you start understanding what they look like from their customer's perspective, because it's about a journey, it's about a chain, and if you see the connections, you get to see the customers in a completely different light. And you really start to get to understand their goals, their aspirations, and their wants. And they become allies instead of customers. And you can share the values between you, and everybody wins. So, very briefly, what I'll try to show you is that understanding environmental impacts and understanding social impacts, you can truly create and deliver better value. You can and will serve your customers better. Now you will lower your risk, and you will therefore give you the opportunities to access both A, finance easier, because all of a sudden you are showing a risk management program far better than most companies going to a bank would do. Because you're showing that you really understand your business. Because how can you make risk mitigation policies if you don't know what the risks are, if you've never bothered to find out? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's there. I mean, if you take the universe, 25% of the universe is dark matter. You can't see it, but scientists know that it's actually trying to stop the universe from expanding. If you can imagine this stuff as your 25% of dark matter, and it's a barrier to your growth, if you don't understand the habits you can put into your business. Now, it's been a very, very quick talk, this, and I know I've got to get off. But what I'd like to show you is on this card in your goodie bags, and if it isn't in your goodie bags, you can get a card off the table over there. I've put together an ebook, especially for this event. It's 33 pages, there's some nice pictures, and it's easy to read, but it'll give you a lot more detail on how to see the connections. You'll also find on there a 35-minute video tutorial, which I put on there as well, to help you see the connections. And if you would like a one-to-one with me, you can have a 30-minute one-to-one, so we can get really clear about your specific business and see what habits, and get really clear of the kind of habits that you would need to put into your business. So lastly, I'd just like to leave you with one story. As business owners, do we all remember who our first customer was? Everybody remember your first customer? How special are first customers? Really special. First copy of the check on the wall, first customer. Well, I'm going to tell you that my first customer, when I specialised in sustainability, was an SME, and you would expect, was it the managing director? Was it the finance director who sponsored me? No, the person who sponsored me was the sales director. And Peter, brilliant guy, standard sales director. He wants to sell more, at better margins, at less risk, and into new markets. And he saw it straight away. So fundamentally remember, it's more than recycling your paper cups, it's more than saving money, it's about mitigating your risk, it's about growing your business, but it's about creating your provenance that so few companies actually take the time to do. So I would just like to thank Helen very much indeed for asking me to speak today. An absolute inspiration and an absolute joy to know. Thank PayPal for the wonderful facilities. And, but really importantly, I'd just like to thank you for listening to me so patiently. Thank you very much indeed. And what I'd actually like you to leave you with is go away, think about how to build your provenance, build your wealth, and make a difference to the world right away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very passionate talk. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Sustainability, I think, is something that has been bandied around an awful lot, and it's always about sort of your carbon footprint and things like that. But I think sometimes we use it as a PR stunt way more than an actual business tool. And I think one of the things that Chris has demonstrated here is how much of it we can use as a tool. And I know certainly from some of the clients that we have worked with that the sustainability aspect of it came into them not because they themselves felt that they needed it and they needed the policies, but for the people that they supplied, and they were supplying into maybe large organizations or corporate organizations, that in order to be able to get on to their supplier list and to supply to them, that they had to have these sustainable issues and these sustainable matters actually dealt with in part of their company, or they simply wouldn't get past procurement. So it's a very interesting point that you can literally lose a deal with a big corporate simply because you don't have the sustainability that they require in order to hit their own policies, because they will have a sustainability policy. That is an absolute guarantee. So a very interesting chat, and thank you very much for that, Chris. I very much enjoyed it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last open discussion of the evening. What I would invite you to do is, I know that there are many of you who did not get a chance to talk to the people that they wanted to, who are experts in the room.